Hey everybody, Quantum back here again, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at my self-piloting Ruby Amethyst. This is the deck that I probably have the most experience with, but in set 4 we haven't played it too much, but it definitely has come back into the metagame for sure as one of the top contending decks. Once we've seen it basically have a way to deal with its toughest matchup, which is the Emerald discard decks. But we're going up against my friend's Ruby Sapphire, and what's nice is he actually, my friend that is, took this deck to a store set championship this past weekend on July 13th and went undefeated in Swiss, coming first after Swiss, and then in top 8 I believe he ended up taking second place. I can do an interview with him, I think. He said he would be willing to do that to discuss kind of his results. But he's a person who's new to TCGs more or less, and he's gotten really involved in Lorcana. I'm not saying that I'm his only testing partner, but I do think some of the testing that we've been able to do has really helped him progress. He did take Ruby Sapphire and have a lot of success with it in that tournament. Unfortunately, for those wondering, did I participate or what am I doing for Store Set Championships? Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'll be able to attend any, and I have not attended any so far, simply because, just a lot of life things going on. I just don't have the time to commit to a 6 to 8 hour tournament potentially. It would just be too hard with all the things going on right now. But I can play from home. I can play virtually and just help out my friends and continue to make content for you guys. So that's nice to see. What I will say also, I don't know, I'll get to commentating this match in a second. It's pretty basic though for what's going on so far. Is I do believe that the testing did help him. Again, he can, when I do the interview with him, maybe he'll comment on this a little bit more. But for example, in this particular matchup, I think he realized that dealing with the Queen's Castle is just like too much of a auto win for the opposing player. Like, it's really hard for the Ruby Sapphire player to deal with the Queen's Castle, and so this testing that we were doing literally in this matchup, I believe, led him to believe include Hercules in his deck. And this is before Bochum happened, right? We were testing this like, I don't know, over a week ago. And I think in the top 4 Ruby Sapphire list for Bochum, the guy was also running Hercules. And I messaged my friend, I'm like, look at that, like, for being somebody who's new at TCGs, you're able to pick up on these things and put in these techs because you realize, these are where I'm suffering, this is where I need to make up ground. And you get that from testing, right? You see where your weak points are, and it's not necessarily weak points for a deck all the time. It could be weak points in like a play style or something, because everybody builds their deck differently according to their play style. So this just goes to show you how important testing is. And like I said, my friend had a lot of success over this past weekend with coming second place in the store set championship, which I'll say the store that is local to our area has a lot of really good players. I'm sure that's how it is in a lot of places, but we're close to Toronto, and Toronto is not that we had a lot of players from Toronto, but Toronto is a place where literally some of the best players in the world come from, in all card games: Yu-Gi-Oh, Lorcana, Magic the Gathering, etc. Top players from literally in the entire world come out of that area, and we're very close to that. And we do get some players from Toronto, and just in our local scene, very good players. So for him to have success at that store was really awesome. Anyways, let's go on to the actual match here. We've progressed quite a bit. This match is definitely a slow burn though, and a slow burn in the sense that you're going to see that it's just removal after removal after removal. So they Medusa away my rabbit, which they have to deal with, right? I mean, we had this discussion during the match. It's like, you have to deal with the rabbit at some point, otherwise you're just going to stay there and just keep getting me card advantage if I can bounce it. So they have to Medusa it, they have to deal with it. And then of course I have the follow-up play to deal with their Medusa, which in this case was a Tremaine. And I will say, for Tremaine kind of not being included in the early iterations of Ruby Amethyst, I'm really sold on this card in the deck now. It's just like having that extra little bit of removal, especially against these like explosive decks that drop things like Tamatoas and just high removal cards, is very, very good. Also, of course, Tremaine can deal with Ward to a certain extent if you're able to clear out the rest of the board. It's just a very good card overall. Plus a quest for 2. Yes, it gets traded out by by Madame Medusa, sorry, as you saw there, because it has 3 strength, but it is very good in a lot of matchups still. So we're not able to progress our board state too much. We just opt to play the goat and pass. The opponent here is debating what they want to do. I am anticipating that they're on a Be Prepared or 2 at this point, so I don't want to overcommit to my board, which is why I only play the goat. They end up questing with the Medusa, and I think they're only on like 3 cards in hand. They ink a Maui here, and they do opt, or they one jump and then they opt to play the Be Prepared. So I know that they're in a little bit of a rough spot because they're hurting for card advantage. We were able to out their only Hiram here, and I think they just dropped their hand on the board there. So it's one card in hand. We draw and then play Rabbit, Ink, and I believe we just pass off that. At this point, I was holding a Queen's Castle as well, and I didn't want to ink it, and I think my other two cards were like two uninkables, maybe like a Be Prepared and King Undisputed, and a third uninkable or something, because I have 4 cards in hand here. They drop a Sisu, so again, once again, dealing with the Rabbit. Oh, they had 2 cards in hand, they drew for turn, that's 3. They play Sisu, so they have 2 cards left in hand. So yeah, they weren't necessarily out of gas just yet, but they are dropping bombs, right? And so thankfully I do have the answer. So there was one of my uninkables in the Lady Tremaine, and I think I have a King Undisputed and a Queen's Castle in hand. So can't ink the King Undisputed, not that I would want to at this point anyways, because removal at this point of the game is very valuable, and the Queen's Castle is definitely a way that I'm going to clutch out the game. I've seen them ink, I think, 2 Mauis already, or play a Maui and ink one. So again, trying to keep track of what their outs are is very important. Of course, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, if the opponent did end up playing Hercules in this particular match, which they were not on when we played this match, they were on the Hercules after, I would have to be very careful of whether or not I know if I would want to play the Queen's Castle or not. So here you can see them finally drop another Be Prepared here, and then drop a Fishbone on top of that, and now they finally have 1 card in hand. So you can argue, was it right to Be Prepared there? It's just 1 character. And of course, like I said, I was holding on to this Queen's Castle, knowing full well that the opponent, had removal options in hand, and I just wanted to get them out of the way. But you can argue that if they didn't Be Prepared there, I would just get a free 2 lore with the Lady Tremaine if they had no other way to remove it. And then I would still follow up with Castle. They would still be in a rough spot, so they have to slow me down at some point, right? Dealing with the Rabbits when they're played, if I'm not bouncing them right away, is something you ideally want to do, because again, the Rabbit is a 2-for-1, right? You have to deal with it. If you don't deal with it and it gets bounced, it's going to be a draw 4, right? So you have to be very aware of that. The Rabbit is still very, very relevant. And here you can see them. They did indeed have a 3rd Maui, but it's just not enough, right? The Maui comes in, it does 6 damage, and this is what really hurt the opponent in this particular matchup, and what made them realize that, yeah, I just need, I don't care about Hercules being uninkable, I just need a way to deal with Castle, because in this particular scenario, you can see, they did 6 damage to the Castle, but now unless they have a 4th Maui, which is their only other rush character in the deck at this point, there's not much else they can do. This Castle is going to gain me the lore. It's going to allow me to draw cards. They just couldn't deal with it in time. And that Maui having that 1 less strength in order to deal with the 7 willpower of the Castle makes a huge difference. Here you can see them play out their entire hand and playing out that Be Prepared to prevent me from getting the draw 2 off the Castle. And then they play an ice block, so that's their whole hand depleted. So we draw, we gain the 2 lore off Castle, we play a Rabbit, and then I think, okay, we got a disconnect there, but I think I play another Castle, and then with the extra ink now being on 9 ink, I'm able to move my Rabbit to the Castle to hopefully get an additional draw next turn, which is exactly what we do. With double Castle on board, I'm going to close the game out within the next turn, because next turn I'll get 4 lore going to 17, Quest with Rabbit go to 18, and then if I have a Goat Cycle in hand, that could be potentially game, or just win the game on the following turn, because the odds that my opponent has 2 answers to 2 castles is very unlikely. So here you can see them drop a Tamatoa, get a Popsicle back, play Popsicle to get a card draw, but it's just not enough, and I think I'm explaining something to my opponent around something, yeah, about like closing out the game. And do I have a Goat Cycle? I do, yeah, I have Goat and Fox, yeah. So I was just telling him I do have the Goat Cycle, which is game next turn, because, yeah, Quest with Rabbit, if they can't out at 18, drop Goat, cycle Goat for 19 and 20, and that is a GG. Let's move on to match number 2. So in this second match, we're on the play. So in the first match, I think we were on the draw there, and we were able to still come out and take that one. This match, though, my hand was a little bit rough, even though I do get a 1-drop. What I will say, and what I was telling my friend in this match is, this is still a very bad matchup for you as a Ruby Sapphire player. And keep in mind that for both of these matches that we played here, I did not have a turn 2 Flynn Rider, even though I was aggressively mulliganing for it. If I did have a turn 2 Flynn Rider, these matches could have gone much worse for the opponent, because it's very hard for them to deal with that Flynn Rider, especially on the draw for the Ruby Sapphire player, because it means that they cannot, on curve, brawl away the Flynn Rider, right? Which means I do get 3 lore off of it instantly in the beginning of the game, which could make all the difference in when we're trying to close things out. You're going to see, though, some of the interesting tech that my opponent has in order to deal with, not deal with, but just like accelerate their game plan towards the end game, which is nice. But you can see we missed a turn 2 drop, and that really is what killed us in this match, or you know, hurts us a lot. But we do have a turn 3 Sisu. Let's see what the opponent is going to opt to do here. On 3, they play Fishbone, and they ink Tamatoa. I think he just inked it, and I was like, you have to show me. That was for his turn, sorry, that he has to show me. He didn't have to show me for the Fishbone. But they're on 5 ink now. We're on 4. We do drop Castle on 4. And then we quest with both of our characters and pass turn. I don't need to banish my Chernobog followers, fearing a Maui coming down and taking it out, because if a Maui comes down, they likely want to throw their damage into the Queen's Castle. However, you could argue that throwing it into the Chernobog isn't necessarily that bad either. But us already being on 5 lore and being on the play is pretty significant. They're going to use Fishbone in order to continue to ramp here, it looks like. So clawing back some of that advantage from me being on the play, Fishbone Quill will allow you to definitely mitigate the disadvantage of being on the draw, especially when you're able to make up the card advantage with something like a Hiram here. So being able to pop and draw 2, you know, refills their hand a little bit, but they are only on 2 Inca's follow-up, and they still can't deal with this castle or my Sisu. So again, the slow progression of the Ruby Sapphire deck is potentially putting them very far behind in this scenario. We quest with Chernobog and we banish it in order to draw, and I just go full on castle mode. I'm going to go ahead and drop a second castle, pay 1 to move the Sisu to the castle, and then pass turn. Now, you can argue that this is not great because the Hiram plus the Maui here represents 7 damage, which, as you can see in this scenario, is enough to take out a castle finally. This prevents me from getting 2 lore, but it also stops me from drawing the extra card. I did not have the Brawl in order to take out the Hiram because that's definitely what I would have done. Taking out Hiram here would guarantee that I could draw 1 extra card off of the single Queen's Castle I had on board, but also that the Maui would not be able to take out that 1 Queen's Castle that I had either. So we're going to go ahead. The opponent passes after playing a second Hiram there. We're going to draw for turn. Go to 12, quest with Sisu, and go to 14. It's 14 to 0, so we're looking like we're in a really good spot, right? But you're going to see kind of what happens here. And you can argue that maybe I misplayed trying to too aggressively go for the castles here, because you could argue, and this is what I learned from playing this matchup, you could argue that I would want to set up these castles a little bit closer to when I had the ability to be prepared, so closer to 7 ink, because that ensures that I could deal with board states that my opponent puts up. So in this current state, you know, I can't deal with the opponent's board, the double Hiram plus the Maui. I think at this point I did end up drawing into a brawl, but like I can't brawl 1 Hiram, and then they still have the other Hiram and the Maui on board to deal with my castle anyways. So my opponent was able to successfully mitigate the castle, but it came at a big cost, right? Me getting up to 14 lore. They can't deal, unless they have another Maui or another form of removal, which they probably have. They can't deal with the Sisu and the castle with what they have on board right now. They need to be able to drop like a Tremaine or something, which I was pretty sure they weren't playing, because a Madame Medusa wouldn't take out the Sisu right now, given that it's on 5 strength, I believe. They're going to go ahead and quest, though, with the other Hiram after using the first one to challenge with the castle. The extra draw increases the strength of this Sisu even further. And I guess you could argue... No, I remember. So last turn, you could say, well, Quantum, why wouldn't you use the Sisu to take out the opponent's Maui so that your Queen's Castle would survive? My opponent, I believe, did specifically, and we talked about this after the match, reduce their hand size enough so that I couldn't take out their Maui with my own Sisu. And I didn't have my own Maui to drop the challenge into their Maui to save my castle. So, you know, I had all of these like little things. Like I eventually drew into the Brawl, but I didn't have the Maui when I needed it. And it was just like a really rough situation. So here you can see me finally drop the Be Prepared, which came 1 turn too late. If I was able to save one of my castles, I would have had this game in the bag. But being on like 2 cards or 3 cards or something, not having any of my card draw because my castles didn't go through, not seeing any of my rabbits here, really hurts me. And now my opponent is going to be able to set up. They're going to have a Tamatoa come down, recur a Popsicle, draw a card, and then ink and pay 2 to Lucky Dime for 3, which puts them to 5 since they were questing with Hiram on the previous turns, going up to 2. And then they pass. So we draw, and we're going to drop the Tremaine on the Tamatoa for 6, and then pass turn, I believe. And we anticipate that the opponent has a ton of removal. They're just able to sift through their deck so nicely with those popsicles. But again, it's why I like Sapphire Steel more, is because you got those Fortispheres for additional card draw and items. But they have a number of cards in hand because they did have those Hirams on board banishing to draw. They're going to go ahead and drop Medusa, right? We anticipate that, yep, you should have a lot of removal. They dime the Medusa going to 6. And again, the slow burn on the opponent's side starts. They're just going to keep diming these targets. And all it really takes is another Tamatoa or 2 to come down, and we're going to be in a rough spot. We do have the second Tremaine. So yeah, my hand was probably filled with a number of uninkables there for a while. Having double Tremaine and Be Prepared probably since near the beginning. And I think I told that to my opponent at the end. But again, it's not... that doesn't really matter. Like, I could have played this better, like I was saying, by not throwing out all of my castles right away without a way to ensure that I could protect them, right? With like being closer to 7 ink and being able to drop that Be Prepared to clean up Mauis and things like that were on the board from dealing with my other characters and or first location that I put down. So they drop a Maleficent Dragon to out my Tremaine, and I hard cast a Be King Undisputed. So again, on double Tremaine, King Undisputed, Be Prepared. And this deck only plays like 14 uninkables or something. So yeah, having all those stuck in hand didn't bode really too well for me without seeing any rabbits. And this is what really killed me, and this is the tech option that my friend was running in his deck. I don't know how effective this was in his Thorset Championship run. I'm going to definitely ask him about it when we have a discussion next. But the McDuck Manor comes down here, and I'm like, okay, you have a Grammatala, you have a McDuck Manor. I haven't seen any Mauis yet. I need to see the Mauis in order to deal with the McDuck Manor now. And it's just going to be hard for me to do that because I think the opponent still has a couple cards in hand. And they likely have removal for anything that I'm going to drop. So it's going to be, I'm going to need multiple Mauis in order to deal with the McDuck Manor, because the first Maui I drop, once I challenge the location, I imagine that Maui just gets removed. And I think, yeah, I remember this match, even though it was like over a week ago. I remember saying like, where's my rabbits? And I finally drew one towards the end of the game here, but it's too little too late because I know that I'm not going to be able to have enough to deal with this board state, because I'm anticipating the opponent is going to have constant removal for whatever I try to develop here on board. Speaking of develop, they develop your brain in order to grab a Judy, which is going to pop a popsicle and draw them a card. And this is just extra draw power for the opponent. And what's nice is, yeah, Judy is just an additional dime target. Dime it for 2, go to 13, and very quickly the opponent is able to catch up in the lore race here. They drop another Judy, and it's just 4 questing power on board with that, plus the Grammatala is 5, and the McDuck Manor is 2. That's 7, which is going to be game for them next turn unless I can clean up this board state. We know we have a rabbit in hand, but we need to draw into basically a Be Prepared, and then even then we have no way to deal with the McDuck Manor. I think they're still thinking if they want to play an interaction during this turn or not. They have 3 ink available, so they ink and then play another McDuck Manor for 4, and yeah, that's pretty much game. Because even if I had, like, the ideal thing for me here would be Snake, Crash into the McDuck Manor, Be Prepared. I do have the Be Prepared, but I opt to just quest here. Oh, I miscalculated. That's what I did too at this stage in the game. I remember telling him this after the match, because I thought I had enough lore to play that Flynn Rider. I just inked there, or not lore, sorry, enough ink, and I did not after I Be Prepared because I didn't ink the previous turn. So my goal was, I think at this point the opponent maybe has like no cards or 1 card in hand. I think I was thinking like, okay, Be Prepared the board, play the Flynn Rider, quest for 1 with the Flynn Rider if it can survive, go to 18, and I have a goat and a fox in hand to go to 20. So they draw, and I think they just pass turn. So they gain 4 lore going from 13 to 17, and I think I tell my opponent, yeah, like I had the goat and the fox, and not inking the previous turn screwed me there because I was unable to play the Flynn Rider, and you see me flip it up there. So I think I was explaining that to my opponent. So multiple misplays by me that cost me this game in the end, when, you know, despite having a rough time in the beginning, you know, not having a 2-drop, I still could have come back and won this game, but the McDuck Manors definitely clutched it out for the opponent there. But like I said, them being able to deal with my queen's castle definitely was the game deciding factor for them. Let me know what you think if you made it this far in the video, though. That's going to obviously do it for it. Thank you again for watching, though. Quantum is out.